Welcome to another episode of the Caregivers Journal podcast. I am your co-host, Lance A. Slatton, along with my esteemed friends and colleagues, Cindy and Christina Hardin-Weiss from Adaptive Equipment Caregiving Corner. Welcome, ladies.
Hi, Lance. Good to see you.
Always good to see you guys. And we have a special guest today, Carlos Olivas. He is a family caregiver and a volunteer advocate. Carlos collaborates with esteemed organizations such as Caring Across Generations, the Alzheimer's Association, and Into the Dark Blue Men's Wellbeing Group. Welcome, Carlos. How are you?
I'm doing as well as I can be for a Wednesday morning.
Yes, I hear that. Carlos, before we get into, your story and, your advocacy and, your role as a family caregiver, a lot of viewers and listeners may be familiar with you. You're kind of well known on Instagram as Charlie Robot. How did that all get started?
Charlie Robot is a nickname that was created by one of our longtime family friends, Esther Perez, who just labeled him as Charlie Robot. Charlie is a family nickname that his mom gave him. It's the interpretation of Carlos in English.
Being your father.
Yeah, my dad. And Esther would say he's always busy like a robot. He's always innovative, ingenuity, and has this creative mind and work ethic. So Charlie Robot has been around since I want to say the 1980s.
Wow.
So when I was on a podcast out of the UK, and it was actually a conference online during the pandemic, and we were in a breakout room, and one of the other members in that group was living with Alzheimer's. He's a photojournalist, and he created artwork. He sketched and did paintings and stuff like that. And I showed him some of my dad's work, and he encouraged me to get dad onto social media. So thus the creation of Charlie Robot on Instagram.
That's awesome. I love that.
And Carlos, speaking of your father being a robot and being an artist, for our viewers, and I recommend if you're listening to this, go watch the video. Basically, everything you're surrounded by, you were just sharing with us before we started. He created the spiral staircase, the sculpture hanging on the wall, the blue wall. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's I've grown up with art since my first recall of memory. Laughter, art, work ethic. My dad was always tinkering with something.
Incredible. You've often spoken about how your caregiving journey began with your father's Alzheimer's diagnosis. Share with our viewers and listeners what that transition was like for you personally, and how stepping into that newfound role really reshaped your life and purpose.
Yeah, of course. It all began in 2015 with a phone call from my dad's dentist. They called to bring up concerns over the observations of my dad's oral hygiene, him getting lost on the way to an appointment or not showing up. And they just want to let me know, because I was the emergency contact for my dad's health proxy. So when you get a phone call like that, you're like, okay, this is an emergency. Like, I am somebody that they're reaching out, and it's a shock.
Yeah.
It's a shock that rocks you in many ways that ripple over time. So fast forward to 2015, we get the Alzheimer's diagnosis, and still shock. We're in awe because dad is having challenges. I'm having challenges communicating with him, and dementia. There's two different kind of aspects there. And I I didn't know what to do. I thought I knew best. I thought I could kind of manage dad just by supervising, being around the house, not often, but really just being there as a support member. But all that supportive actions was really causing a rift. Dad and I were bumping heads. I was frustrated, angry, upset. I uprooted my career in Southern California in the events industry, being a single parent and moving back home. And it changed. I had to adjust to something that I didn't know anything about. I didn't know about Alzheimer's. I didn't know about caregiving. I didn't know how to change under duress. I had to find how to do this. So how do you do it? How do you go through these changes and these emotions that are unfamiliar, uncertain, and really full of chaos?
Absolutely. Before we go on, Carlos, do you have any recommendations for what eventually you found that was most helpful to you? Because, there's millions of family caregivers out there. Your story resembles mine, pretty paralleled, where I got a call one night. I was in my early 20s, newlywed, pursuing medical school. Your father needs to come live with you, or we have to put him in a facility. His wasn't dementia or Alzheimer's. He had developed a wound and it had spread. And the location of the wound didn't allow for him to properly manage or treat it himself when the wound care nurse didn't pay her visit. So it's likewise, no clue. What do? You think, they're going to give you a prescription to help with the caregiving. None of that ever comes. What was it for you that you found most helpful during that time?
Was getting out of the house and then running away fast.
Okay.
That's what helped in the beginnings. I'd run to my friend's house and just like have a beer, smoke a joint, and just trying to disconnect. But then I had to come back into the reality that my dad wasn't doing as well as I thought he was doing. I had to go through a denial process to understand where he was at. I think the pivotal time is calling the Alzheimer's Association's helpline. They guided me into workshops, caregiver support groups. Once I got there, I started feeling like that was my tribe. That was the place I needed to be that supported me. I got to hear from people that didn't look like me, much older, and they were mostly women. But I felt the wisdom, the gratification that I was learning something that was not in school books or where I could kind of really get some institutional learning.
Right.
And my core right now, I would say, is caregiver support groups.
Yeah.
At one moment, I was in like 6 support groups, meeting online weekly, bi-weekly, once a month, and even hosting my own men's group here in Sacramento as an ambassador for Into the Dark Blue. But it's reinforcing your mental health. Caregiving is a mental health challenge. Getting into a caregiver support group facilitated by a marriage and family therapist or some type of facilitator that has a lot of knowledge and wisdom in the elder care space or dementia space that could also understand where the caregiver is coming from.
Absolutely. And, you said you felt like you found your tribe, and, we have a home care company here in Michigan. And, I tell families all the time, you're not alone. And I think for so many, myself included, my peers in college, professors, home care, caregiving, wasn't looked at as a medical issue. The ladies probably experienced this in their occupations as, therapists, speech and occupational or, physical therapies. Just knowing you're not alone and that there's other people that can relate on some level to what you're going through. Because like your buddy that you said, I'd run out of the house, go to his place. He's there because he's your friend and, you have that bond, but he can maybe only understand so far if he hasn't gone through it, so having that other component, I think, is critical. So thank you for sharing that, Carlos. And that kind of ties into this next question. Caregiving often brings us both emotional and sometimes physical challenges as well as financial, but it brings both emotional challenges and a profound growth. In what ways has caring for your father deepened your understanding of, love, patience, and resilience? And how have these things helped to influence the advocacy and the advocate that you are today?
You're hitting an emotional button right there, because it is emotional to go through this roller coaster ride. We suffered a loss with my mom, who passed away from breast cancer and challenges with diabetes and cardiovascular conditions. And it was hard on us. And my dad, me and my brother were keeping an eye on my dad because, with that loss, that long-term marriage, comes grief and depression and all the feels after something like that. And when we started, noticing behaviors with my dad, we just chalked it up as, he's retired. He doesn't have to be on time to anything. And he's allowed to just be himself. When I got that call, emergency contact call from the dentist, it threw me into panic. And ever since then, I've been bracing for impact, because it's hard to actually convey in words.
Right.
My dad, raised me, did an amazing job raising us boys, taking on the challenge when my parents didn't have an instruction book for how to do it themselves. They came from humble beginnings, broken families, single parents, but the core of their nurturing was love. And I think that's what was brought into our own family, that we were, our core was just love. That was everything. Mom was cooking and she cooked with love. Dad built this house. He built it with love. There was a lot of intention. And that intention is where I have it now. I feel if we were to put my dad into like a senior care facility, that it would bring him down, because he would not be able to thrive as well as being in his own home, surrounded by familiar objects that he can socialize with, be full of pride and purpose, and be fulfilled to create to this day. And I get to witness that and be proud of that.
Absolutely.
I get to be proud of my dad as he's teaching me still to care for him.
Absolutely. And, Carlos, we've just only met today. We haven't talked prior to this episode. But had you not said that about your parents, I would have assumed that anyhow, just from the short time we've been talking today, that, you had amazing parents. Your dad and your mother, did an amazing job raising you and, your brothers. So I can understand, wanting to do everything you can for him. And he's just as fortunate to have you as you are to have him, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah. One more question, then we'll go to the ladies. Serving on the California Health and Human Services Agency's Alzheimer's Advisory Committee really gives you a platform to help influence systemic change. What kind of policies or initiatives are you championing right now through this role? And how do you see them being implemented to help make a difference for caregivers and families?
Well, that's a really good question. That appointment into that committee is I feel it's out of my league, but still I can have a voice from the caregiver perspective of what caregivers need to support their loved ones living with Alzheimer's or related dementia. There is a huge gap between the medical professionals, state, local politicians, social workers, everybody. They have little knowledge of what Alzheimer's is, or even what the difference is between dementia and Alzheimer's.
Can I add something real quick? And I think as little understanding that they have about that, I think they have even less about what family caregivers go through.
Right. And when I was brought on to the appointment, I felt unconfident because I didn't know if my voice was going to matter. And I was encouraged to speak up because there is a lot of value and wisdom that caregivers provide. And we are doing millions and billions of dollars of unpaid caregiver work, and we are not having benefits because of it. I don't have a retirement. I don't have good health care, but I've had to go above and beyond to get that. The master plan of aging, or master aging plan, or something like that, MAPS. I know I'm going to get this wrong, but it's a strategy to prepare California for the impact of Alzheimer's and related dementias. We have the largest elder population in the United States, and we have about the largest amount of people that are living with Alzheimer's and related dementias. So, and currently, right now, Alzheimer's is the second leading cause of death in California. So what do we do? What do we plan out for the future? How do we create a dementia-friendly state that recognizes and normalizes aging? How do we go about taking initiative and being proactive in the systems that are already in place and getting them up to speed to take on this challenge? Because the projected numbers are huge. It's going to double within the next 25 to 30 years. And we need support. Caregivers need support to support the loved ones that are living through this challenge.
Absolutely.
This disease is going to weigh heavy on our communities.
Right. Absolutely.
The more we educate, and the more we spread awareness, the better that we can all live together.
Absolutely. I'm fond of saying when you have a dementia patient, you don't just have one patient, you have their family too, or whoever the caregiver is. So you're really treating two people. But I feel like the healthcare system needs to start looking at it like that, because again, it's just for the betterment of society as a whole. People are, like you said, your retirement, your health insurance, all of that, that affects society, not just you, but society as a whole. And we need to really recognize and support these family caregivers and do whatever we can. And that's why we do the Caregivers Journal and the work that we do and that Cindy and Christina does, and what you're doing, so admirably. I'm going to go to Cindy, Christina, and Charlie. Just thank you so much, Carlos, for doing the work you're doing at Charlie Robot and all the advocacy. We just admire and support the work you're doing out there. Ladies?
Absolutely. Yeah, Carlos, I love hearing about, kind of your process and your story. And we talk to a lot of caregivers, and a lot of caregivers are advocates. And in doing that, we also think about, how do you handle, these stories about your father are so wonderful and your family, but how do you handle being an advocate by sharing those stories, as well as kind of balancing that privacy and dignity of your dad? Do you have it's kind of a formula that you use, or do you feel comfortable in doing that just because of being an advocate for people?
This is the reason I do what I do. Right there, that individual. We're out here getting our steps in, like I haven't gotten enough already. So here we go. Right, Pop?
What?
I said you're doing a good job.
Oh.
Say hi to your fans.
Hi, fans, I'm here. And to all you guys out in the Navy, yeah, I was there.
All right. All right, peoples. Enjoy your day. Let's go.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's a good question. I tread lightly with my dad now. I've had my caregiver coach call me out on the dignity part. So that took me into a rabbit hole of trying to understand what dignity is. I've had to unlearn it and relearn it as I go. And it's hard. It's hard to understand how you're insulting the integrity of dignity,
Right.
without knowing you're doing it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I when I started filming my dad for social media, I asked permission from him.
Mm-hmm.
Calling them fans. Your fans want to know about you. They want to see your artwork, because he has this fabulous house filled with artwork that he's created that never really gets to be shown.
Right.
He doesn't sell his work, and the ones that he has sold are just very few and rare.
Mm-hmm.
The strategy that I've taken as of late is to show him in a light that's positive. I don't want to show him angry or confused or just discombobulated.
Right.
I want to show him, happy, at least content, engaged in a practice of art.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to show him out in the garage more often, but it doesn't seem like he's going there. That he doesn't have the stamina to stay up standing for a long period of time. And it's kind of a mess in there right now. We are in the middle of reorganizing, cleaning out old stuff, trying to go through a process without aggravating dementia.
Right.
My dad's appreciative that we are taking this task on.
Mm-hmm.
But where is that threshold where we have to be concerned about and observant of dementia raising up and being very, very dominant?
Right. Right. And that's a tough line. Mm-hmm. That is a very tough line. But I think it is awesome that to share his artwork, especially with people that are experiencing others with dementia, and just showing that, he's still that person. Yeah. He's still that person. He had he has these wonderful qualities, and to share that, I know that line is very difficult, but to share that, it's awesome. I think it's awesome. Yeah. You work with a lot of impressive organizations. like the National Advocacy Group for Caring Across Generations to grassroots communities like Dark Blue. How have these partnerships expanded your reach, and what collaborative projects have you especially felt like they were very meaningful to you?
Right. Carrying across generations. I'm a 2022 fellow, and it was encouraging for us to gain some momentum in the advocacy space to shine light on what caregivers go through.
Yeah.
I feel it's my duty to give back to organizations that I feel inspired by their work. Caring across generations is looking into the burdens of caregivers and how they can be supported and recognized as members of society. We are a backbone across the nation, very diverse. There's a lot of equity and inclusion that drives us to be surrounded together in unification and embrace the struggle. We are struggling as well as we can with variety of adversity. And we need to have that story told. And that's why I feel very confident about speaking out about the challenges caregivers go through.
Right. I really appreciate, besides everything else that you do, that part of what you do, because it seems like, sometimes it can be an exhaustive thing for us shouting as caregivers that, we are out here and caregivers need to be, and we're professional caregivers. I'm not claiming to even be a personal caregiver, not yet full time, but, I love that work that you're doing. I know it can be exhausting, but I commend you for that, because it just seems like it needs to be thrown in people's face constantly for people to understand that,
normalize it.
Very, very important. Very important.
Yeah, right. And then for Into the Dark Blue, the men's wellness group,
Yes.
it focuses on men's mental health and topics that we don't really discuss.
Right.
I mean, my dad's never really talked to me about mental health. It's something that is like pretty much a moniker of, hey, why don't you go get me a beer?
Yeah.
Why don't you let's go do something else that get you out of that mindset.
Right.
But it's not really proactively addressing the challenges that people are having. Men need to have an outlet to express themselves, to understand their emotions, and how to practice wellness in this space. The thing that drew me into the Dark Blue is that the concept is building a community and a relationship with alcohol. We have our most of our meetings are at a local brewery around the nation, and we talk about mental health. So you're taking alcohol, mental health, and combining them together. And that I thought was a very unique concept. I quit drinking in 2021. So it's the challenge of walking into an establishment that has a variety of awesome beverages, and I can't have any.
Yeah.
But I don't miss it. I don't drink. I don't drink because it's one of those modifiable risk factors for Alzheimer's. And it was a challenge to my brother, who passed away in 2022 of alcoholism. So when I got involved with Into the Dark Blue, it was caregiving and mental health. Those two kind of resonated together. They were the core of the challenges that I was having. I was bombarded by different types of obstacles that were really pinpointing me into situations that made me uncomfortable, that I didn't know how to release and let go or surrender and embrace. So
Yeah.
I felt, a calling to that. Being an ambassador for the local Into the Dark Blue group is something that helps me give back to men, to support them through their journey, and to create a community of wellness.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Go ahead. Yeah,
I'm up. All right. I got some questions for you, Carlos.
Let's go.
So your role as a docent, which we talked before about, the word docent was new to me, so I had to
Yes.
look it up. So you are like a guide to the art gallery, the Art Beat Gallery, is deeply personal. And as you showcase your father's artwork there at the gallery, how has preserving and presenting his creative legacy become a form of connection and healing for you? And what responses do you see from your public?
It's another good question. When I walk in through the doors of Art Meet Gallery, I have to pinch myself because of the manifestations that were put out into the universe of showing my dad and his work. It's not unusual for a person living with a dementia to revert to a routine. And that routine could be from childhood, adolescence, or their work career that they've done for 30, 40 years. It could be gardening. It could be folding towels. It could be a variety of different things that keeps them busy and full of purpose. There was a time after Dad's diagnosis of Alzheimer's that he started picking up pen and paper and started drawing. He started going into the garage. He started being active. And it was a change. It was a complete 360 where he was sitting out in the yard just watching the wind go by, or watching TV all day long and not having a clue of what the storyline is. I felt it was a need to highlight someone that was going deep into the roots of his brain and just showing off, just doing something that he enjoyed. Thus, we created a intention to get my dad's artwork out into the public. 2019, 2018. I don't remember anymore. I got my dad's artwork into a solo gallery art show, just kind of like, hey, announce to the world that my dad's living with Alzheimer's, but he still has agency enough to participate in his own creative activities. Come 2023, there was a call for an artist in a gallery. I met with the owner. I talked to Janet and said, look, my dad has Alzheimer's. I would like to show off his artwork. What can we work out? She told me how it worked. I said, sure. She invited me to put Dad's artwork up on the wall. And since that day, I volunteer every Friday for several hours at the gallery and show off my dad's work, spreading awareness and educating about Alzheimer's and related dementias and the routine that my dad goes through. Mm-hmm. And I get to be surrounded by other artists and their artwork. And I get to reinforce my mental health because I get to see these colors, these images that spark creativity, curiosity, and I get to practice my own artwork surrounded by others while sharing my dad's artwork.
Fantastic. What's the response been from the public that come into your art gallery to see your dad's work?
They are amazed that someone this far along is still participating in creativity and can exhibit this like immense imagination and creativity. You know, my dad's colors are very vibrant. His lines are sharp. There is specific details that are unique and imperfect and associated with Alzheimer's.
Okay.
You know, the works are Alzheimer's related. You know, he just says, this is my doodles for the day. This is my brain. And whatever I feel today, I just lay it down on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes there's a combination of colors that don't really kind of jive. Sometimes there's mistakes that are derived by his loss of concentration. We'll have two colors in the same space, and you'll hear him sometimes go, "Oh, damn," under his breath, and he's like, he's kind of makes it work.
Mhm.
That's
He
awesome.
adapts, and he is engaged with himself to feel that purpose. He doesn't let his disability deter from his abilities.
Well,
That's awesome.
And that's what we try to do. We try to focus in on his abilities and not the disabilities.
Mhm.
yeah. So there is other artwork there. Do you ever take your dad into the art museum and let him look at other artists' work? And can you see any kind of mirroring or borrowing of some kind of shapes or forms or colors once he goes and goes back and does his own artwork from that maybe he's borrowed from other art that he's seen?
I'm not sure if he's borrowing from other artists.
Okay.
It's really hard to kind of pinpoint that and say, oh, that was inspired by someone's geometric dress that they had that was vibrant and had nice shapes. Or, flowers that are on our walkway when we go for a walk. I can't really say that, he gets his inspiration from that. But I do take him to the museums. We go to Second Saturday and we get engaged with other artists and they get to mingle and he gets to see different things and he gets to be engaged. His mind gets arrested by some type of image and he'll sit there and stare at it. And he'll comment, say, I like it. And I will engage back and ask him why. And he's like, well, I like the colors. And I like the way they approached their method. And they composed different things. And he'll be inquisitive into understanding how they went through their process to get their final result.
Cool.
And it's different because his mind, I believe, is processing different than my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, he's thinking, in 3D or even 4D when I'm in, 1D.
Right.
But he's like he understands the mechanical side of it, the meticulous methods. Because of his educational background. I mean, he's done jewelry making, woodworking, sculpture, pottery. Anything he touched, he learned and adjusted.
That's wonderful.
So it's hard to kind of really say that he gets inspired by others.
Yeah.
I think he just has his own, mind, and he just sees these things the way he sees it.
I love it.
That's cool.
I love it. Carlos, so you frequently speak at events and panels, engaging diverse audiences with your stories and insights. What messages or emotions do you hope people walk away with after hearing you speak, whether it's their caregivers themselves or simply learning about challenges others face?
Mm. Sharing my story is hard. It takes a lot of courage to get up on stage or in front of a camera and speak out. It all comes. The root of it is out of love for my family, my dad, and the journey that we're on. That's the core of it all. Love is hard. It's difficult, and it doesn't always work out the way you want it to work out. But I get up every day, and it's a fresh new start. I have that resilience, the determination, the devotion to continue. It's heavy, but I've been able to exercise enough to carry that weight. And it's a practice. The practice to being caregiving. I didn't figure that out until a few years ago, that I have to practice caregiving. And that practice is taking care of yourself so you can be a better caregiver for the loved one you're caring for. And what I want people to take away from this is having a mindset of a caregiver, to take on the priority of yourself first. You embellish yourself and surround yourself with a team that cares for you. Who is in your circle? Who can you call at 2:00 in the morning to help you clean the bathroom after an explosive mess? Who do you call when you are crying and you are full of emotion and you just don't feel like getting out of bed? Who picks you up? Who is cheering you on? That's the message I want to convey, is who is around you, supporting you. Because there's only so much you can do to cheer yourself on.
Yeah.
To encourage you every day to do these things. But where are you drawing that from? Are you listening to podcasts that inspire you to be that caregiver? Are you going to support groups and getting the knowledge and the courage to continue every day? Where are you getting that from? Yeah. And that's what I want people to look into. Where are you getting that motivation?
That's such an important message, and I feel like we touch on it almost every time we do our podcast. And Carlos, your message, your story is so inspirational. I can't imagine it would be hard for people. Would have to they have to have that message. They have to feel it. They have to see it and be inspired by it when they walk away from your presentations. So tell me, what's next on the horizon for Carlos and Charlie Robot?
Next on the horizon. Well, I'm not sure if you know, we are featured in a PBS documentary called Matter of Mind, My Alzheimer's. It's about 3 families that are navigating Alzheimer's. And it highlights the caregiver, the main role of the families that are navigating through this. They're going through the challenges of providing care for their parent or their loved one. uh, it's been a long journey. I'm kind of grateful that I'm able to show that a male Indigenous Latino can be on screen being reflected as a main character for my dad. It's been extremely challenging in this difficult role of being a caregiver. I mean, you've seen one caregiver, you've seen one caregiver.
Mhm.
Just like you've seen one person living with Alzheimer's, you've seen one person living with Alzheimer's.
Right.
But this film brings out three different families, three different struggles, three different challenges, and three types of Alzheimer's disease.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is wonderful.
Where can people go to watch it or learn more about that, Carlos?
Right. Currently, it's you have to check your local listings on PBS, see if it's being shown on there locally. It's also being aired on the PBS app, pbs.org, and PBS's channel on YouTube.
Okay. Awesome. That is wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful.
And
Great.
then on the horizon, there may be a book in the works, or at least some type of publication that includes my words into the project called A Caregiver Mindset.
Mm-hmm.
We are, this is having a mindset embodies a strategy of mental health, support, and some grit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Agree completely.
And then I believe May 27th or sometime in June, there'll be another documentary that will have a little bit of us involved, but it's going to be centered around caregivers and caregivers of different diverse backgrounds that are dealing with the challenges. And it's I'm really excited to see it because there's a lot of caregivers out there that either past, present, that are showing their story, and it's going to be amazing. And then in the future, I hope to continue sharing a calendar of my dad's artwork,
It's a great idea.
having more engagement with art collabs, especially with the Veterans Art Institute, that will be showing artwork of veterans that will include some of my dad's artwork.
Fantastic.
Wonderful.
One day, I hope to have a coffee table book of my dad's artwork, as well as showing a retrospective of my dad's artwork from the early beginnings to now.
Yeah.
I love
that's
that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I look forward to I'm gonna go on PBS on the app and look it
Yes.
up, or maybe on their YouTube channel. I want to see that and put all that other stuff on my calendar. Carlos, I think that's fantastic what you're doing.
Make sure you have some tissue.
Oh boy.
Some of you might be cutting onions or something in the kitchen, so just make sure that you're prepared. This is a care item. So
Appreciate the heads up.
support yourself. Support yourself. This is my support tissue box.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I love it. I love it. Well, Lance, that's all the questions we had.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you, Cindy and Christina. Carlos, Olivas, thank you so much for all the work you're doing and for sharing your remarkable father and story with everybody on the internet. I encourage everybody to go to Instagram, follow Carlos and his dad and their journey at Charlie Robot. We appreciate your time and advocacy. I want to talk about something that's important for caregivers like Carlos and caregivers everywhere. And our friends Natalie and JJ are putting on a self-care at sea cruise. We're unfortunately not able to be there in person, but we are one of the sponsors. But I would love for Cindy and Christina to share that.
Yeah, we are so excited. This is going to be October 19th through the 26th. I think we're going to be on a brand new boat by Norwegian. It's called the Norwegian Aqua. And, it's just a time for caregivers to come and do some of that self-care, like Carlos was talking about. We're going to have lots of different people there that are going to be able to support you. We've got, JJ and Natalie from the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver. We've got a lot of other hosts. We've got Elizabeth Elizabeth Miller from Healthy Caregiver. We've got, I'm just going to say them all. We got Carrie Alberts, Dementia Darling. We've got Christina Keys from Keys for Caregiving. We've got Vidya from Brain Charge, and then us. And we're going to be having a blast. So we would really love you to go.
If you want to go do some excursions with us, we're all going to, each of the hosts are going to be going on an excursion. Or if you just want to stay and lay out in the sun or hang out by the pool, it is all up to you, because it's all about you and recharging yourself.
That's right.
Wonderful. And we'll have the website and the link in the show notes as well as on the screen. Charlie, I lied. I'm going to ask you one more question before we say goodbye today. How many years have you been caring for your father as his care partner?
It's 9+ years.
Okay.
And we keep on going.
Just like a robot. So my question, Carlos, is, if you were to talk to yourself and had the ability to go back 9.5+ years ago and see Carlos back then, knowing what you know now and doing what you do now, what would you tell Carlos 9.5 years ago?
Run.
No, you're
Woo!
The views shared and reflected on Caregiver's Journal don't necessarily reflect the Caregiver's Journal.
Right. Wow, that's a really deep question, because there's times where I have to look in the mirror and tell myself, what are you going to say to your younger self 9+ years ago? And to say, hey, you're going to do a good job. You're going to love on Dad. You're going to be there for him when he needs you. Do the best you can. Shore up what you need to do, handle your affairs, get it together, keep on moving, and love yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's beautiful and very sound advice. When we meet with families, Carlos, they always say, I don't know if I'm going to do this right. I don't know what to do. And your answer is what we basically tell them. If you're doing your best, that's all that can be asked of you, right? So thank you for sharing that. And again, thank you for sharing your father and your story. Our community is better for it. And anytime we can help support the work that you and your father are doing, we're happy to do so. Thank you for joining us at the Caregivers Journal. Now it's time for our Caregivers Tip of the Month.
Hey, what?
How can I make it easier to get a walker through a narrow doorway?
Let's take a look. So if you've got a wheeled walker, typically the wheels come, if it comes to you, the wheels are on the outside. If you actually take this walker, turn it upside down, you're just going to take the wheels off of each side and just swap them from side to side, just like that. Oh, there we go. And when you do that, that puts the wheels on the inside, and it's going to give you probably another 2.5–3 inches of width clearance.